the new developments in the Karen Reed murder trial.
This has been a wild turn of events.
I've seen a lot of things. I've never seen anything like this. This case never ceases to amaze me.
It's a spectacle, that's for sure.
It was a hung jury, so no verdict, no real ending to this case.
Karen Reed was back in court where a date was set for her to be tried once again.
There are a lot of issues in this case.
Proctor was improperly searching Karen Reed's cell phone for nude photos.
Michael Proctor, the lead investigator,
relieved of his duties.
It's always the theories that each side will put forth for a jury to decide which one is more believable.
Karen Reed was drunk and angry and hit and killed John O'Keefe when she gunned it in the snowstorm.
Karen, did you ever say I hit him?
I did not.
There are more people here at the beginning of this than at the beginning of Johnny Depp's trial.
We're not concerned about any of the witnesses. None of the Commonwealth's witnesses are concerning us.
And once again, there was drama outside court.
There is a whole new set of legal troubles for Karen Reed. She is now facing a wrongful death lawsuit.
The lawsuit alleges that Karen Reed was drunk and reckless when she hit John O'Keefe.
It's not just Reed being sued here. The family also suing the two Canton bars from that night.
The two bars are liable for over-serving her.
The FBI is investigating an investigation of a murder. That never, ever happens.
At this point, multiple jurors have been reaching out to both sides, saying that they are certain Karen Reed is not a killer.
I did not kill John O'Keefe. I've never harmed a hair on John O'Keefe's head.
We're looking at arm injuries with scratches. We're not looking at tire tracks.
There are 17 jurors, and they're coming and going with a police escort.
The investigation wasn't thorough.
This can't be good for the prosecution moving forward.
I just hope justice is served for either one, whatever it is, you know.
The fate of her life is not in her hands anymore. It's not in the hands of her attorneys. It's not in the hands of the prosecutor. It's in the hands of the jury now.
Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed!
In the last episode of Conspiracy in Canton, we covered a lot of information and updates. I've been out of town covering another trial, so it's been a few weeks since that episode was released, and a lot has happened in those few weeks. Canton seems to stay pretty busy, so we have a lot to cover in this episode as well. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the results of some of the investigations that have been going on for some of the law enforcement directly tied to Karen Reed's case and the trial. First up, Kevin Albert. There were a lot of things that came out during the testimony of lead investigator Trooper Michael Proctor. Or should I say former Trooper Michael Proctor. One of the bombshells that was dropped while Proctor was on the stand is the behavior of Brian Albert's brother, Canton police officer Kevin Albert, while he was working with Proctor investigating a cold case. Texts that were read in court revealed that Kevin, Albert, and Proctor went out for drinks while in Cape Cod during this investigation in July of 2022, about 6 months after John O'Keefe's death. They apparently drank so much that Kevin misplaced his badge and gun and was asking Proctor if it was in the car.
In fact, the two of you got so drunk that Kevin Albert left his badge in your cruiser and couldn't find his gun the next morning, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
I can't speak to any level of intoxication, but I don't recall either of us being intoxicated.
Got it. So isn't it true that on 7/20, July 20th, 2022, the day after, at 8:39 in the morning, you texted Kevin Albert, quote, "Found your badge in my cruiser this morning," end quote, correct?
Yes.
Then you texted him, "I can leave it in my locker at the gym, drop it off at your station, or leave it in my mailbox," correct?
Correct.
Kevin Albert responds, "My mailbox. Did I take my gun?" And then included a wince face emoji, correct?
Correct.
So the fact of the matter is, you two got so drunk that he couldn't find his badge and had to ask you the next morning where his gun was, right?
After this came out at trial, Canton Police Chief Helena Rafferty commissioned an independent investigation, and Kevin Albert was placed on paid administrative leave while it was conducted. Now, the Canton Select Board voted that the discipline for Kevin would be imposed by Chief Rafferty. Another Albert brother, Chris, is of course on the select board, but he recused himself from the vote about his brother. You'll recognize Rafferty's name from a previous episode where Canton residents were expressing their frustration and displeasure with Rafferty and with her police chief contract being renewed. I read through the report that was issued on Kevin Albert, and it says that the investigation began on June 17th of this year, and it continued through the end of August. And the primary focus is to determine whether Albert misplaced or lost his service firearm and badge during that cold case investigation. Kevin and Proctor drove out to Sandwich, which was about an hour and a half away. They did one interview that lasted around an hour to maybe an hour and a half, and then tried to do another one, but they couldn't locate the second person. So they decided to eat dinner while they were there. Kevin made a comment to Proctor in text about this, about stopping for dinner to soak up the overtime. So they went to a place called Flanders Field in Hanover. Now, when asked about alcohol ordered, Kevin Albert said that he didn't specifically recall ordering a beer, but he acknowledges that it was certainly possible, and he would take full responsibility for ordering 1 or 2 beers. Kevin Albert said that when they went in to eat, he left his badge and firearm in Proctor's car. He said they're cumbersome, and he doesn't like to carry them in. Proctor's car had a safe and a locking glove box, so he said that the gun was in the locked glove box and the badge was flipped over upside down in the console. He didn't report it missing because he said that Proctor told him before he went into work the next day that it was in his car. When Proctor dropped him off at Canton Police Department when they got back, he says that he did take his gun with him, and he says that the text about losing it was just a joke. When he got home, he said that he drank 2 or 3 IPAs and watched TV. Sounds simple enough, but that wasn't everything. The attorney who was conducting the interview with Kevin Albert was given his financial records after this interview, and there was another stop that he and Proctor made along the way, and he failed to mention that. They stopped at a brewery where there were 2 purchases made. The first was for $34, and Kevin said that that was for 2 drinks that were consumed there. The second was for $70.80, and Kevin said that that was for drinks purchased to go. He says that they were going on a trip a few days later, and he was going to take the alcohol with him there. It's interesting that the report says that based on the number of drinks consumed, the travel time between establishments, the food intake, and Kevin Albert's tolerance for alcohol, that there's no evidence to suggest that he was under the influence of alcohol to the extent that it would violate Canton Police Department's rules regarding criminal conduct. The number of drinks consumed wasn't able to be verified because the establishment wasn't able to do an itemized receipt after more than a year. So they're basically just taking Kevin's word for it. Kevin, who also didn't tell them about the brewery. Which brings up another point. The brewery included them buying drinks to have there as well as drinks to go. And we'll never know how those drinks were actually consumed or when they actually drank them. Plus, they're factoring in Kevin's alcohol tolerance. That's not something that an attorney conducting an interview would generally know. But that's what they're going with. The report does say that he violated the policies of possession or use of alcohol and conduct unbecoming an officer. They determined that he did not, however, violate the rules on misuse of his firearm, and the resulting punishment ended up being a suspension of 3 8-hour shifts without pay. He's already back to work now. Kevin Albert was on paid administrative leave during the investigation. So when you take a step back and look at what all of this means, a Canton police officer gets drunk while on duty, so much so that he misplaces his gun and his badge, and as a result, he gets 10 weeks of paid time off while the taxpayers fork over about $9,000 for the investigation report, along with about $20,000 for his paid leave. and they wonder why so many Canton residents are frustrated with law enforcement in the area. The investigation into Trooper Yuri Buchanan is also concluded. The text read on the stand between Buchanan and Proctor were offensive and derogatory. And shortly after the mistrial was declared, the state police announced that Buchanan was the subject of an internal affairs investigation that we've discussed in previous episodes. Massachusetts State Police Colonel Mon said that Buchanan failed to conform to work standards established for his rank, title, or position when he failed to properly supervise and or counsel a subordinate for sending inappropriate correspondence regarding an ongoing investigation. Basically, he didn't tell Proctor, hey dude, that's not cool. Any kind of acknowledgement to your subordinate that that behavior isn't okay would have done wonders. But this is Canton. It turns out Buchanan's punishment isn't too far off from Kevin Albert's. But instead of 3 days unpaid suspension, he has to forfeit 5 vacation days. Now, Lieutenant Fanning was also in the group chat, but he was on vacation with his family in North Carolina when those texts were sent. He says that he didn't recognize or have any memory of those derogatory messages, or about Proctor talking about looking for Karen Reed's nude photos, or the offensive names that he called her. He says if he had seen those messages, he would have addressed it. Since he was on vacation, he's out of the punishment. The fallout with the Proctor text continues in other ways as well. There's a new filing this month from the Norfolk County District Attorney that says that Proctor's full phone history being released could compromise privacy and potentially other cases. Proctor was suspended without pay, and in August, the Massachusetts State Police provided an extraction of his work cell phone to the Norfolk County District Attorney's office, and also contents of his work cloud account. District Attorney Michael Morrissey is now wanting to determine what, if any, information is discoverable on this case or other cases, and the best way to go about handling it. Now, this will determine what information is shared with Karen Reed's defense team, as well as any other defendants in any of the other cases that Proctor has handled. This is continuing to be a real problem. Proctor also handled the investigation into the death of mother of 3, Anna Walsh. Her husband, Brian Walsh, is charged with dismembering her with a hacksaw while their 3 children were home, then disposing of her remains after using his son's iPad to Google the best ways to get rid of a body. He had a court appearance on October 2nd in front of Judge Canoni, and his legal team is wanting all of the information from the extraction of Proctor's work cell phone and cloud account to help them defend Walsh. They're also requesting the entire Department of Justice records, around 3,000 pages, all of it on the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. It's really concerning what a huge impact this situation is having. It goes so far beyond just the Officer O'Keefe death. There's some more news about Proctor that we need to discuss. In looking through some of the Brian Walsh filings, when they mention Proctor, the attorneys say that he was first suspended and then terminated. Now, this made me stop in my tracks. Terminated? That's something we haven't heard yet. That filing was in late September, and 1 week later, on October 1st, the post-commission suspension list was updated. Proctor's name is no longer on that list. It looks like Proctor may now officially actually be gone from the Massachusetts State Police. I know we've covered a lot of information already, and we still have so much more to go. Between working on this case and the others that I'm covering, and recording the podcast and doing interviews, there's so much information constantly coming at me and so much to get done every day. I've been using Magic Mind, which is a mental performance shot, in addition to my daily routine. And it has helped me to keep focused, to keep mentally clear, motivated, and I have been more productive than I've been in a long time, all while reducing stress and giving me over 100% of my daily vitamin C and D per bottle. The difference that it has made in how much I'm able to focus and what I'm able to get done, it's like night and day. There's time-released caffeine, and that's important because caffeine does not actually give you energy. It blocks the receptors in your brain that tell you you're tired. So when those receptors unblock 1 to 3 hours later, you experience this sudden drop in energy called a caffeine crash. But Magic Mind formula uses 12 active ingredients to help support your body's energy engine. So it's not just a fleeting charge up. It's created with a scientific advisory board of doctors and medical researchers, and it's been in development for 10 plus years. And there's over hundreds of iterations to perfect the formula. There's also no risk. They're so confident in what they've built that they refund 100%, no questions asked, for 100 days after buying. Not only have I added Magic Mind to my daily routine, but I also now have my best friend and my boyfriend taking it daily. I just placed another order yesterday. You have a limited offer that you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code JUR20 at checkout. You can claim it at magicmind.com/JUR20. That's JUR20. We also have some updates related to the Karen Read case. Now, I mentioned in the last Canton episode that Judge Canton denied Karen's motion to dismiss on double jeopardy grounds. So her attorney, Marty Weinberg, appealed 2 of the 3 charges, counts 1 and 3, the ones that the jurors said that they were unanimous on. They sent that up to the Supreme Judicial Court, which is the highest in the state. Now, Justice Elizabeth Dewar took on the appeal, and she had the power to dismiss it entirely or pass it on to the full panel of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. She issued a ruling on the appeal, stating that she is reserving and reporting this case without decision for it to go before the full Supreme Judicial Court panel. So what that means is that a full panel of justices will hear the arguments from both sides about why the 2 counts should and should not be dismissed, and then they will make a decision. The process could take a while, and there's a chance that it could delay the second trial. If the SJC approves this request, it would mean making a new law in Massachusetts based on this case. The defense filed a brief by the deadline of September 25th in which they argue that the jury's final unanimous agreement with Karen Read was not guilty on counts 1 and 3, which would constitute her for double jeopardy purposes. They also argue that as an alternative solution, they are entitled to a post-verdict judicial inquiry to determine whether the evidence supports the juror representations as to having acquitted Karen Read. Basically, they just want them to talk to the jurors, find out if this is true. The appeals process may end up causing a delay in the trial date, but that hasn't stopped the Commonwealth from working to make some changes to get ready. One big change is who, if anyone, is going to come to Lally's rescue. DA Michael Morrissey announced that he has appointed Special Assistant DA Hank Brennan to prosecute Karen Read in her second trial. He will join Lally on the Commonwealth's case. Laura McLaughlin will also still be on the team. Now, McLaughlin never did any of the direct or cross-examinations. In fact, we only actually heard from her once during the entire trial, and that was when she was making an oral argument to Judge Canton. But maybe this time around, we'll hear more from her. Caleb Schillinger is also added to the team, but Hank Brennan will be the lead. Now, Karen Read's attorney, Alan Jackson, gave a statement about this newly appointed attorney. He said, quote, "The news that Michael Morrissey has decided to use taxpayer funds to hire an outside lawyer to prosecute this case speaks volumes about his confidence in his own team. They can bring anyone they want to court. We will beat this unjust prosecution just like we did the last time. Like we've said to Mr. Morrissey previously, do your worst. We'll see you in court." End quote. Those taxpayer funds that he's referring to were just obtained as of today through a Freedom of Information Act. It looks like it will be about $250 per hour with a maximum obligation amount of $75,000. Honestly, for the scope of this case, that's really low. Maybe if counts 1 and 3 get dropped, but even then, it's a very low amount. Think about it like this. $250 an hour for a 40-hour work week is $10,000. That would mean that the limit isn't even enough to cover another 7.5-week trial, much less any of the extra time that's spent prepping for it. Special Prosecutor Ken Mello was paid $400 an hour to come in and take the case against Aiden Carney for the alleged witness intimidation charges related to this case. That's $400 an hour, and this guy's only getting $250 an hour. Very interesting. In Morrissey's statement, he said that Hank Brennan is a highly respected and skilled former prosecutor and longtime defense attorney with over 25 years of experience in state and federal courts, and he has expertise in handling complex law enforcement matters. Brennan also released a statement that said, quote, "I have 2 core obligations. The first is to make certain that Karen Reed receives a fair trial. Ms. Reed will receive the dignity and fairness that every defendant deserves in our criminal justice system. The second is to ensure that the facts surrounding John O'Keefe's death are fully and fairly aired in the courtroom without outside influence." End quote. If you've heard the name Hank Brennan before, it may be because one of his former high-profile clients. Brennan was the attorney for infamous Boston crime boss Whitey Bulger during his 2013 trial. Whitey was notorious for his brutality and using violence and murder as a way to discipline and control members of the gang. He was played by Johnny Depp in Black Mass, and he was played by Jack Nicholson in The Departed. In 1979, the boss and deputy of the Winter Hill Gang were arrested for fixing horse races. But Whitey escaped the indictment on those charges. Turns out he was also a high-level FBI informant. And FBI agent John Connolly, who grew up with Whitey and went to school with him in South Boston, ended up protecting him. Gotta keep your informants, right? That means that Whitey was able to slip into the leadership role of the Winter Hill Gang, and he spent the next 15 years terrorizing South Boston. In 1994, Connolly tipped Whitey off one more time, letting him know that arrests were coming. His other high-level associates were arrested, but Whitey was able to get out of Boston, where he stayed on the run for the next 16 years. He remained on the FBI's most wanted list, and for a while was second on the list, right after Osama bin Laden. Whitey and his girlfriend were finally apprehended in Santa Monica, California in 2011, and he was arraigned on 48 federal charges, including 19 murder charges, dozens of racketeering and conspiracy charges. He went to trial in 2013, and his attorney, Hank Brennan, built a lot of his case around trying to prove that Whitey wasn't an FBI informant. Being a snitch, or a rat, as they call them, goes against the organized crime code, so Whitey was on board with this story, saying that he didn't do that. Brennan hoped to undermine the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses by proving them wrong, and he put some heavy focus on the ethics of the prosecution's case. Kind of ironic, isn't it? After the verdict, Brennan said that he was expecting to expose a little bit of government corruption, and he had hopes that this case would be the beginning where people would reflect a little bit on the government. Whitey was convicted on 31 of the 48 counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison plus 5 years. Whitey did time in several federal prisons, and in 2018, he was sent to Hazleton Federal Prison in Brewston Mills, West Virginia, after threatening a staff member of the Florida prison that he was in. He was 89 years old at the time, and in a wheelchair due to a hip injury. At 6 a.m. the next morning after being sent there, less than 12 hours after his arrival, Whitey's cell door slid open, and cameras caught at least 2 inmates as they rolled him in his wheelchair over to the corner out of the view of the cameras, where he was beat to death by fellow inmates using a padlock inside of a sock. 2 of his attackers were other Boston mobsters. According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, Brennan wasn't happy about Whitey's death. He said that he intended on suing the government for prison killing. He wanted to know why the prison decided to wheel an 89-year-old man with a history of heart attacks into one of the most dangerous prisons in the country, and he intended on filing a civil suit for wrongful death and negligence on behalf of Whitey's estate. In the suit, Brennan sought $200 million in damages, claiming that prison officials placed Whitey in harm's way when they transferred him to Hazleton, in large part because of his reputation as a mob turncoat and a killer of women. Hazleton is also known to be understaffed, and it has a long history of violence, earning it the nickname Misery Mountain. The family members of Whitey's victims were infuriated with the wrongful death suit, saying that it rekindled the pain that they had been living with for decades. A federal judge dismissed the lawsuit in 2022, stating that the Federal Bureau of Prisons must provide for protection, safekeeping, and care of inmates. But this does not guarantee a risk-free environment, and decisions about how to safeguard prisoners are generally discretionary. Brennan appealed the decision, but in March of last year, the appeals court upheld the dismissal of the wrongful death suit. So, with that out of the way, I guess now he can turn his focus to prosecuting Karen Read, another case where government corruption is at the center of the story. But this time, he's sitting at the prosecution's table instead of the defense's. It's also expected that Trooper Paul will be replaced, maybe this time by someone who actually has some expertise in the field. This will be a welcome change, but it opens up some questions about how the defense will handle the prosecution and police changing their entire theory of what happened, since the last theory made no sense. Will defense call Trooper Paul to question him about what he said happened and how he got kicked off the case? So many questions yet to be answered. There's also another update on juror interviews. Aiden Carney, aka Turtle Boy, interviewed another juror, one that has not reached out to defense, that was pretty open to answering some of the questions that so many of us have had, and some of the answers were pretty insightful. For example, the juror felt like the most convincing witnesses were the ARCA experts, but since they came in and couldn't say who hired them or why they were there, since the mention of the federal investigation was prohibited, the jurors actually thought that maybe the defense was just trying to derail them, especially since the defense utilized those reports and the conclusions, but the prosecution didn't. Knowing that the ARCA experts were hired by the FBI would probably have made a big difference to the jury. This juror said that there was an engineer on the jury that was telling the jurors that the ARCA guys didn't give any of their data or parameters, so they weren't credible. That is wild to me. That's one of the problems with holding information from a jury, though. The jurors said that they were also clear that the murder charge was out on the first day or two of deliberations. There were 6 who believed that she may have hit him accidentally, and the other 6 believed that she didn't hit him at all. The juror also said that there were a couple of them in the group that wanted to reach out to the judge and tell her that they were unanimous on counts 1 and 3. But the foreman told them that that's not what they're supposed to do, that they have to be unanimous on all 3 counts. When the jury would do polls to determine who stood where as far as guilt was concerned, they eventually stopped including counts 1 and 3 in the vote because he said it was always 12-0. Now, that's a pretty big deal, especially given what the defense is asking of the Supreme Judicial Court in relation to double jeopardy. Multiple jurors wanted to fill out the form to acquit on counts 1 and 3, the 2 that they agreed on. And the foreman that the judge appointed, who is the only one that's allowed to actually reach out to the judge or to write notes, said no. They needed to be unanimous on all 3 before giving them the forms. But look, I can't really blame the foreman for that. That is how it was written or worded in those jury instructions. The juror has considered reaching out to the group and having them all come forward together to address the acquittal. And they thought it was going to kind of resolve itself or get resolved or Judge Cannoni would change her mind. But none of that happened, so they've wondered if they could or should do something. Another piece of insight was the thought process behind the jury asking about the CERT reports. They were discussing the taillight being planted and wanted to see what time the first CERT team members were arriving and whether or not they had a chance to plant any pieces before the state police arrived. The juror also said that having Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and Jen McCabe in the courtroom during closing arguments was intimidating, and it was brought up during deliberations. Also, some of the facial expressions that Karen Reed made during some of the witness testimony apparently made some of the jurors look at her in a particular way. The main reasons that the guilty side believed that Karen was guilty was apparently based on alcohol consumption, the text stream data showing that she went in reverse at a fast speed, and the fact that she and John were there at the same time. He said that a lot of the jurors who were stuck on guilty disregarded expert testimony and any evidence that provided reasonable doubt, and they pretty much just got stuck on that text stream data. You can find the full juror interview on tbdailynews.com. The text stream data was something that was really interesting to me, knowing that they were really hung up on that when we didn't have anybody there that was really capable of explaining to the jury what it meant. I can't help but wonder how that would have impacted their thought process if there would have been an expert who actually knew what he was talking about explaining it. I guess we'll never know. So let's switch gears for a moment and take a look at the updates for the civil suit that was filed by Paul O'Keefe and his family against Karen Reed, C.F. McCarthy's, and Waterfall, where they're seeking financial compensation for damages and suffering. Karen Reed has 3 attorneys from Mellick and Porter, LLP, that have filed a notice of appearance on her behalf. Those 3 attorneys are Christopher D. George, Marissa K. Palladini, and William L. Cavill Jr. Now, these attorneys are likely retained by Karen's insurance company since defense counsel is included in the terms of her insurance policy. But C.F. McCarthy's has also filed a response, and look, they made it clear that they are not going down easy on this one. I mentioned before when we discussed this that it's going to be an uphill battle holding C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall responsible for John's death since there were so many witnesses that said that Karen was not visibly intoxicated. And there's video footage of her where she seems to be perfectly normal, not stumbling. She appears totally fine, just like everyone said she was. C.F. McCarthy's response is basically telling them that they hold no legal responsibility. They demand a jury trial on all triable issues, and they request that the court dismiss the complaint and award them reasonable cost and attorney's fees incurred in the defense of the action. So not only are they saying they want it dismissed, they want their legal fees covered as well. Not surprisingly, this isn't the only Canton drama going on recently. With tensions still running high, more and more issues continue to arise. Buchanan has been visiting the residences of multiple Karen Reed supporters who they are now filing charges against for witness or police intimidation and harassment or annoying communications that allegedly occurred last summer. 14 months after these text messages were sent, there have been at least 3 or 4 known summons sent out recently. Some of them were messages to Jen McCabe, saying things like how she should be ashamed and tell the truth. Some were text messages to Colin Albert, insisting that he's lying and that he should tell the truth. These things were dated from last year, but the summons for the charges are recent. It seems like they're going after anyone and everyone that they can lately. Which brings us to the duck drama. Remember the whole issue with Jackson saying if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck? That prompted some Karen Reed supporters to write phrases like Colin did it on the bottom of little rubber ducks and leave them around Chris Albert's pizza place. Then more little rubber ducks with Free Karen Reed or FKR began to pop up all over Canton. On July 10th, Chris Albert is working at D&E Pizza when he sees two women outside of the place taking pictures. Chris Albert sends Buchanan a text message saying that women were taking pictures, which is fine. But then one woman lifted her hand and made some kind of gun motion to her head, and he said he has it on video. Buchanan tells him to send him the video, and he calls in two other troopers for backup in the area. So they collected relevant surveillance video from that area, including footage from CF McCarthy's, which is more than they did for what happened in front of 34 Fairview, so at least they're showing improvement, right? But when Buchanan and the other trooper were responding to the area, Chris Albert called him again about another incident. This time, he says, there was a male and two females leaving CF McCarthy's next door with to-go boxes, and they left multiple little rubber ducks along Washington Street, one that was on the bench right in front of D&E Pizza. Chris Albert ran outside and grabbed the rubber ducky and took it inside to wait on state police to arrive. When they arrived, they documented and photographed the rubber duckies to enter as evidence. If only they had done that with Karen Reed's car. Turns out it was a woman having lunch with her parents, and they all met up at CF McCarthy's since that's the halfway point between their houses. Within 2 hours of Chris Albert contacting Buchanan, state police were at the parents' house to ask about these rubber duckies. And unlike the interviews in the murder investigation, the interview in the rubber ducky investigation was recorded. The woman was 70 years old and told Buchanan that there was no harm intended. The whole thing was silly. Buchanan tells the woman that it's more serious than that and informs them of what potential charges are on the table. Says that even if they didn't intend harm, harm was done, and then asked the woman if she saw the phrase written on the rubber ducky, referring to FKR. The woman was unable to confirm that she saw any message written on the duck. Now, Buchanan then identified the daughter who was having lunch with this woman and her husband, and made several attempts at contacting her at home. About a week later, they were able to finally speak with her. They went to her house, and she told Buchanan that she had been at Waterfall and saw a rubber ducky with FKR written on it, and just thought that it was something funny and cute that people were doing in support of everything going on. Buchanan continued to push the woman on the ducks that she had. She wanted to know where she got them, and if she's the one who wrote FKR on them, etc., etc. The woman told him, "They're just ducks. It's just ducks." But Buchanan said it may seem insignificant to her, but it builds into something very serious. He questioned her on how much of the trial that she watched, and what she knew about the duckies, and where she got them. And the woman tells Buchanan she's starting to feel really uncomfortable. She said that it was just something very innocent, and now she's being made to feel like she's on trial for something. But he pushes her some more. He wants to know all about the FKR being written on the ducky and her motivations behind it. As he continues to push her, she tells him that she's feeling like he's putting her in a very strange position where he's starting to use her words against her. Buchanan tells the woman that he's gathering all information so that he can present it to the courts for a hearing, where they can then decide if there's enough evidence to press charges. He tells her that it doesn't matter whether or not she knew that the bench that she left the duck on in front of D&E Pizza was actually in front of Chris Albert's place. He says that doesn't matter. And she took it upon herself to write FKR on it for Free Karen Reed. She wrote that on a duck and left it in Canton Center. And that she left one at CF McCarthy's, which he says is where John and Karen were drinking. When he said that, the woman said, "Oh my God, I was eating at CF McCarthy's." Buchanan begins to tell her that they have her transactions, so they know that she was eating there, and they have it on video. So he said she can't lie anyway. It doesn't matter. He apparently smiles or laughs because she tells him, "I don't think it's funny." The woman's husband arrives around this time, which is probably a good thing since Buchanan seemed to be acting the way that he was with this woman. The husband points out that after putting the duck on the bench, the public bench, Chris Albert came out of the restaurant, videotaped them, took pictures, and harassed them. He said Chris Albert called the woman a loser. Buchanan said that Chris Albert is allowed to video record anyone on a public sidewalk because that's his First Amendment right. And he's allowed to call her a loser because that's also his First Amendment right. But I guess writing FKR is not First Amendment, that's witness intimidation. The woman then asked Buchanan why state police are here over this little rubber ducky instead of Canton police. He says that it's because it's related to a homicide investigation and the witnesses being intimidated and harassed. She tells him that she feels like now she's being intimidated. It's a little rubber ducky that was left on a public bench, and now state police show up to her house with a gun and question her like she's involved in a murder investigation. The woman was charged with 2 counts of littering and felony witness intimidation. The state police spent more effort and resources to investigate little rubber duckies on a public bench than they did the death of a Boston cop. If this woman and her parents had done something to threaten or actually intimidate a witness, I could totally understand there being charges. But y'all, this is a little rubber ducky on a bench. Littering, okay. It's a stretch, but okay. But felony witness intimidation, it's really hard not to get frustrated when it seems like Canton can't get their ducks or their priorities in a row. We'll be right back. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Think of a time recently when you didn't feel like you could be your full self, like you were hiding behind a mask. October is the season for wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to, whether it's at work or in social settings or around our family. But therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so that you can take off the mask, because masks should be worn for Halloween fun, not for our emotions. There are a lot of benefits to therapy. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills or how to set boundaries, and it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, it's designed so that it's convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/juror today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/juror. A man named Richard Schiffler was recently charged with felony witness intimidation also, and criminal harassment and littering, a total of 12 counts for having the phrase "Colin did it" stamped on counterfeit $100 bills and rubber duckies that had been spread in front of D&E Pizza. In the officer's report, he says that conspiracy theorists claim that Colin was inside the house at 34 Fairview. But he says it's only the conspiracy theorists who say that, because according to him, it was disproven since Colin said under oath that he wasn't in the house. I'm going to spare you the details here about the other things that Colin said under oath so that we can stay on topic. Regardless, the police recovered some of these counterfeit bills and ducks with "Colin did it" on them, and they pulled trash from Schiffer's house, and they took it to Canton Police Department to go through it for evidence. Now, the bills were apparently ordered from Amazon, and they were able to get that box out of his trash that showed the company that they were ordered from with his name and address printed on it. They then found the company that made the stickers that said Colin did it that he was putting on the bottom of the ducks. And they called and talked to the president of the company to get the information about the order that was placed for the Colin did it stickers. They got a search warrant for Richard's truck to check his infotainment system. And when they showed up, he gave them the key fob and he told them he littered, but the bills and the ducks, he said he didn't commit a crime. Now, while in his truck, they also found 37 of the yellow ducks with the Colin Did It stickers on it and additional stickers that were also seized. Mike Crawford from the Young Jerks spoke to Rich at a protest, and here's what he had to say. It begins when Rich tries to hand Mike a duck.
So I got so many of those. Every time I go out, someone gives.
Probably do.
I have like 50 of them now.
I bet you do.
Give them to the kids.
You got the red one with the Colin Did It on it?
No, I don't.
Oh, so you don't have?
I don't have that one.
You don't have the, like, you don't have the original.
All right, there you go. That looks like I could get arrested in Canton for.
Yeah, all right. Well, they went through my truck already, so I didn't find shit.
Are you the guy who?
I'm the guy.
Did you want to talk about that at all, or not?
It's just a joke. Tully came to my house, came to my shop, my business.
Who came to your house?
So Tully, Lahan, and another Stoughton cop came to my shop in Stoughton, my business. Went through my truck, my system, my Toyota, my information system, see where I drove in the month of March. Right, so I started the duck campaign and the money campaign in February. So I got caught on Proctor's ring camera and a bunch of other people. I don't care because I'm fighting the fight. So anyways, they went through my thing on a Tuesday. The following Tuesday, they came to my house. I wake up in the morning, they're at my house, going through it again. The same thing, same warrant, 2 warrants, and you know what? They didn't find shit. They don't find nothing. And you know what? And I got the arrest warrant. I can email it to you.
Do they arrest you?
Not
or they just go on?
The warrants.
Are they?
But the charges that they're going to charge me with, the police report, I'll send that to you.
I would love it.
I'll send you that. What she said about the ducks, and then she led into the thing with Rita's lawn. Mostly it was about the ducks, and she threw the thing about the lawn in it because people were asking, you know. But I'm not hiding from nothing. I started this. So Colin did it once. And I started the ones with these. It's a trigger word. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when they came to you, did they threaten you with certain charges?
Oh, they want to get me an intimidation. Mike, honestly, what I think they're trying to do is connect me to Turtle Boy. So they couldn't. So this is me, myself, and I here, Mike. I've got nobody involved in this. I did this on my own, smoking a joint at night. Thinking, what more can I fucking do to help? So that was it. And these are my signs I made up. And I started with the ducks. And it's been hilarious ever since. And I can't believe how it's grown. It was an idea back in November, but then in February I started it. And they just don't like the message. You know? It's the bottom line is they just don't like the message.
This interview was referenced in the report, along with another YouTube stream of Sean McDonough, a retired DEA agent who has closely followed the case and been in support of Karen Reed. In that stream, McDonough mentions talking to the king of ducks, the king of the $100 bills, and says that he has 5,000 ducks being delivered to him. The report says that they were able to confirm that he was referencing Richard Schiffer. They say that the duck stickers are falsely accusing Colin Albert, and they are relying on this false information to constantly harass members of the Albert family. People leave ducks outside the restaurant and have shown up wearing large duck costumes. So Richard Schiffer, who has never spoken a word to a witness in this case, is also now facing felony witness intimidation charges. I'm not saying that what these people are doing is right, but it's hard for me to understand or accept the amount of intimidation from law enforcement and the severity of the charges, while so many people who have done so much worse are slapped on the wrist or just completely ignored. I can't help but feel like there's a group running things, and you're either with them or against them, and your consequences will rely fully on what side you choose, not on your actions. It seems like the state police are more focused on trying to send a message to Karen Reed supporters than they are worrying about things that they should be worried about, things that actually do matter. And trust me, there are a lot of things that should matter to them right now. For example, the death of Massachusetts state recruit Enrique Delgado-Garcia.
Family and friends absolutely heartbroken and looking for answers after their loved one, who was a recruit with the Massachusetts State Police, died from injuries he sustained during an exercise at the academy.
Well, Massachusetts State Police released that statement confirming that Enrique Delgado-Garcia experienced a medical crisis during a training exercise.
Ay, mi niño.
The cries of a grieving mother.
¿Por qué se llevó mi hijo? Mi hijo era tan bueno, tan bueno.
My son was so good. I just want to understand why they took my son.
Ay, mi niño.
The best of all of us. All he did was study and run. That's all he ever did.
Delgado was training for 3 months. He was set to graduate in 2 weeks. The exercise at the academy consisting of 2 rounds of boxing where trained fighters were not allowed to take part.
And if you stick to goals and objectives, it should be safe.
But Delgado's family and friends say his injuries are not consistent with what he would have sustained during a defensive tactics training exercise.
Teeth missing, brain injury, that didn't come from boxing, especially a round of 2 minutes.
A training exercise does not explain how he had a broken neck, missing teeth, and brain injuries.
They killed my cousin, and they run away like cowards.
Now they're calling for accountability and answers from the Massachusetts State Police.
They need to thoroughly investigate this, and that justice needs to be brought.
And while the family continues to search for answers, the Massachusetts State Police says they'll continue to support the family as much as they can.
No settlement is gonna freaking bring my cousin back. It's that simple. They know what happened. They're trying to cover it up.
Enrique Delgado-Garcia dreamed of being a state trooper, and when he joined the 90th Recruit Training Troop, he thought that his dream was going to become a reality. 25-year-old Enrique had spent 3 months at the Massachusetts State Police Training Academy, and he was due to graduate in just a couple more weeks. But he tragically lost his life on September 14th after what initial reports described as a medical crisis during a self-defense training exercise while at the Massachusetts State Police training facility. Enrique's family was told that he was hurt during some sort of boxing training, and he was said to have become unresponsive during a defensive tactics training exercise, and the academy's on-site medical team attempted to render aid. But he needed more than what they were able to do, and Enrique was brought by ambulance to UMass Memorial Medical Center, where he died the next day. A department spokesman confirmed that Enrique was sworn in as a trooper shortly before his death, and he was surrounded by family, loved ones, and classmates during the ceremony, which culminated in him being pinned with the trooper badge. Colonel John Maughan released the following statement. The Massachusetts State Police grieves the tragic loss of trainee Enrique Delgado-Garcia, and we offer our deepest condolences to his family and loved ones. They have the full measure of our support and care, and they remain full members of our state police family. Enrique was a fine young man who devoted himself to the service of others as a member of the 90th Recruit Training Troop, and in his former role as a victim witness advocate in the Worcester County District Attorney's Office. In his short time with the state police, Enrique demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to learn and a desire to deliver excellent police services to the people of Massachusetts. He made an immediate impression on his classmates and the academy staff. By all accounts, Enrique possessed and displayed all the qualities that would have made him an outstanding trooper: kindness and compassion, dedication, commitment, willingness to work hard to improve himself, and a strong desire to help others. As a department, we will, first and foremost, continue to support Enrique's family and honor his memory. We will additionally support our members, trainees, and their families as they cope with this heartbreaking loss. The statement was nice, but that isn't enough for Enrique's family. They want answers. Enrique's mom told Telemundo, "They killed my child." She said that he had brain damage, and the doctor said that it looked like her son had been in a car crash going 100 miles per hour because of how hard that boy hit her son. He was hit so hard that it destroyed his brain and broke all of his teeth and even fractured his neck. Enrique's stepfather said that the family is truly distraught. They're devastated, and they're asking for an explanation. The family does not believe the explanation that this kind of damage, the missing teeth, the severe brain damage, and a broken neck, could all come from a 2-minute round of boxing. Enrique was known by his academy class for his compassion and devotion to service, and one of his friends said that he would have been the best state police officer there. Enrique's body was moved from UMass Memorial Medical to the officer of the chief medical examiner, and on Saturday, September 28th, he was laid to rest in a funeral with full police honors. Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. had jurisdiction over the case, but there's a conflict of interest since Enrique worked in the office as a victim witness advocate. So, the Attorney General has decided to appoint an independent investigator to look into Enrique's death. Attorney David Meir has been selected to oversee the investigation into the circumstances surrounding what happened. Now, this isn't his first major investigation. He was appointed by the governor as a special prosecutor in the state drug lab tampering scandal that resulted in tens of thousands of convictions for drug offenses being overturned in Massachusetts. Meir was also the attorney for Ernest Wallace, the co-defendant of former New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez. Before that, he spent 12 years as the Suffolk County DA Chief of Homicide. So let's hope for the family's sake that he is able to be impartial, objective, and get answers. He said in a statement, quote, "The investigation into Trooper Delgado-Garcia's death will be undertaken professionally, thoroughly, and responsibly. The Delgado-Garcia family, their community, and the public have been waiting patiently. It is now time to get to work." End quote. The Massachusetts State Police have also taken some criticism for how they've handled acknowledgement of Enrique. On their social media platforms, other troopers that were killed while fulfilling duties were all recognized on social media the same day or the day after. For Enrique, it took 16 days for them to acknowledge him. In an article written by Tom Marino for This Week in Worcester, he says that the state not showing him the same respect is disgraceful. And he wonders if that's because it wasn't an outside party that was responsible. It was someone inside the blue line. Thankfully, the state police will have no role in the investigation or decision-making process. They have suspended full contact boxing between trainees since this happened, and the governor has asked the newly appointed state police colonel, Jeff Noble, to undertake an independent review of all the academy's training and programs. And look, it definitely sounds like they need that. NBC 10 in Boston reported that 46% of the trainees in last year's class dropped out within weeks of the start of training. That's almost half. And for Enrique to have the excessive injuries that he did during a boxing training activity, that's not just the loss of one tooth or a concussion. These are traumatic injuries. I've heard of state troopers having exercises where they basically get beat up during training. And I get it. It makes them know what it feels like. So that way, if it happens while they're on the job, their first time experiencing it isn't during a real interaction. So I get it. But those are usually done with someone who is highly skilled and knows when to pull back if necessary. They're going to protect their own. I cannot understand how injuries that severe could be possible. It makes no sense. And how are we here with yet another major issue with this same organization? How many more conspiracies are the Massachusetts State Police going to be investigated for? There have been multiple in recent years. There was the Troopergate scandal, where 2 troopers were pressured to remove embarrassing details about the arrest of a judge's daughter. That resulted in a big-time ethics investigation and the colonel abruptly retiring. Then there was the overtime fraud scandal. Nearly 50 state troopers were involved in submitting overtime pay that they never worked. A number of troopers lost their jobs, and there were multiple federal and state convictions because of this. Former president of the State Police Union, Dana Pullman, was a trooper for more than 3 decades, and he was sentenced to prison for accepting kickbacks and embezzling police union funds that he used to go eat at fancy restaurants and take his girlfriend on trips to Florida. 2 years ago, NBC 10 reported on yet another Massachusetts State Police Academy scandal, where an unauthorized exercise that required trainees to do bear crawls on hot pavement resulted in at least 20 trainees being treated by medical staff. There were changes made to the leadership after that happened, but how effective was it? Especially since 1 year later, that's when the reports were that almost half of the trainees dropped out of the training program within a few weeks. A 25-year-old healthy state police recruit dies after leaving the academy with missing teeth, brain damage, and a broken neck. And they're worried about handing out felonies for leaving a rubber ducky on a public bench. It seems like things can't get any wilder, right? But think again. We have a few more explosive topics to cover in the next episode. The police audit for Canton Police Department is still in the planning process, but the committee had a meeting that ended in shouting matches and the police being called to escort people out of the building. Also, Aidan Carney has retained attorney Mark Betterow to join his legal defense team, and in a new filing, bombshells were dropped, and Betterow has informed the court that if Special Prosecutor Mello doesn't voluntarily recuse himself from the prosecution team in compliance with Massachusetts rules of professional conduct, they're going to seek his immediate disqualification because he has now become an essential defense trial witness. This case just made some huge waves, and you're not going to believe this. Just when you thought things in Canton couldn't get any worse. Next time. My name is Brandy Churchwell, creator of 13th Juror Podcast. If you're enjoying it, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with your friends. For more information, photos, and episode guides, visit our website at 13thjurorpodcast.com.